Grab your favorite alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverage, drink responsibly, do not drink and drive, and join us for the latest episode of Why Complain When You Can Whine. Everything in this podcast is purely for entertainment and psychoeducational purposes only. Enjoy! Welcome to Why Complain When You Can Whine, making sense of the senseless. Join us as we attempt to make sense of toxic nonsense while drinking wine, or whatever beverage you so desire, alcoholic or not. I am Dr. Jody Larman, licensed clinical psychologist in the state of California, and anything and everything that we discuss on this podcast is purely for entertainment and psychoeducational purposes only. And tonight we have had, I am in Southern California. I don't know if you've been watching the news, but we have had a shit ton of rain. It has rained nonstop. My pool has like one wall is higher, and then when you go around, it's got like a cement thing. It's slowly creeping. If it doesn't stop raining soon, my pool is going to overflow. So, and my street floods in the front. So we just stayed home today, got a lot of work done, but yeah, it's coming down. Thank goodness, or knock wood, it is not windy, because we're supposed to get up to 60-mile-an-hour gusts. And if we did last night, I didn't hear it. I slept through it. So that's good, because it gets very windy. I live in the foothills. It gets very windy to begin with. So,
well, I live in Vancouver, so I live in a rainforest. So we get a lot of rain. It's comparable to Seattle.
Yeah, well, we don't.
Yeah.
We're California. We're a desert.
Yeah.
We've been in a drought. So luckily, between last year and this year, hopefully my water bill will go down.
Yes.
Because it is raining, I thought I had a wine that had an umbrella in rain, but it doesn't. But this is close enough. It says red drop.
Oh, there you go.
Like like rain.
Like a raindrop. Yeah.
And it is a dark red blend from California. And because last week and going into this week, thank goodness not today, but it has been I'm sure you can understand this when I show you this. It has been just loads of fun. So my glass says, fuck this fucking day.
Oh my gosh, you're so funny. I need to get those mugs. I don't have anything that says, I do have a mug that says I fucking love you. And then I do have one that's even better. It says, there's a couple, but my favorite one is, if you see me talking to myself, just keep walking on by. I'm self-employed and we're having a staff meeting.
Yep.
So one. Cheers.
Well, you gotta
introduce
yourself.
Oh, my bad. I'm Bree, or Brianne, however you want to refer to me as. Bree, I am a licensed, registered psychotherapist from Vancouver, BC. I am drinking a little bit of Kraken this evening, like I did the last time. I haven't had a chance to go out and actually restock my liquor cabinet, so I'm just gonna dab into this tonight.
I really thought about making like something tonight, like a hard alcoholic drink, but I decided to just chill for the 30 minutes that I had before this time. So I'm like, I'm just gonna drink wine. But oh my God, I could use some tequila or some vodka or some rum. Not this time, but cheers.
Cheers, Lovey. So, Dr. Larman, what are we going to discuss this evening?
Well, I've already seen it, and you are watching it. You are watching, is it Shrinking?
I finished. I finished it.
So no spoilers or anything. Okay. Oh. So this is basically, I take issue. I love watching, but I take issue with how mental health is portrayed on TV, in the movies, and it's oftentimes portrayed in an extremely unethical way that makes it seem as if this is what mental health truly is. So we both watched Shrinking. Good show. I really liked it. Yeah. But the whole time I'm just like, I hope people.
Well, that's the problem, right? Because that's not the real world. And a lot of people, and we both know this, of course, take TV and movies and stuff as like literally, right? If you haven't seen the show Shrinking, it's got Jason Segel and then a few other characters in it. Oh, and
is it Harrison Ford?
Harrison Ford. Oh, so great. In it. And that's why it's so funny, is because Harrison Ford is just like, it's Harrison Ford. And it's like, this is a satire sort of show on psychologists, therapists, right? But to a lot out there that don't really recognize or have never been to therapy or whatever, might take this literally and not with a grain of salt.
And unless you read that it's satire, like if you read the description of the show, if you just start watching it, it doesn't necessarily, it's not played as satire. I mean,
Yep.
it's not corny or campy or anything like that. It's seems like this might actually be real.
Yeah, legit, but actually funny. Like it's funny as hell. The show is so funny. I mean, that's where the comedy piece kicks in, right? Especially when you're seeing Harrison Ford. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna spoil this one part, but it just kills me when he talks about raw dogging and he has no idea what that is. And he's a full-blown psychologist. And then finally the other two at the end are like, should we just tell him what it is? Like it's really quite funny. Like it's actually quite humorous. But you also have to recognize that the way that these actors are portraying psychologists, no psychologist could ever ethically behave the way that they're behaving or acting on in the show as licensed clinical professional PhD doctors.
I don't even think any kind of
There
ethical therapist in
are,
general.
no, I couldn't. There's just no way. Like you watch Jason Segel's character and how he's just struggling with his own personal stuff. And then as a therapist, doesn't have those boundaries in place and flips out and does what you are not allowed to do with clients or patients, right? So
I know that when I very, very first started at school for my graduate, and maybe it was my undergraduate, but I know in my graduate, one of the things that they teach us is you leave your feelings at the door. Any crap shit, anything that's going on in
yeah,
your life, you leave it at the door. Now, we're not robots, we are human. So we do have bad days, but we are not supposed to be giving those bad days to our clients.
mm-hmm.
My clients, all of my clients, I'll say, how are you? And, they're good. How are you? And no matter how I am not going to say, I'm going to say, I'm fine. It's great. I'm not going to be like, well, this is going on with me. It's not my session.
Mm-hmm. No.
And I'd like to say that this is just on TV, but I have
Mm-hmm.
seen enough TikToks about people saying their clinician, what is it? Turns it around and uses therapy for their own
Oh
personal
dear.
whatever.
Yeah.
So I know I have, it's not a phobia, but I have this fear now ever since being on TikTok. I will talk to like my clients will ask me a question and it's like, I was having some construction done and my gate opened, but I didn't know they were coming and I hear the gate open. I'm like, oh my God, hold on a minute. Someone's in my backyard. I think, and they're like, oh, what, okay. And then I come back and I go, okay, it's all good. And they're like, oh, what are you doing? And I'll tell them sometimes, but then I also say, look, this is your session. And I really don't want to find myself on a TikTok with somebody recording saying, my clinician's only talking about herself.
Yeah, well, I've run into that myself. I've seen clinicians myself that often revert and talking about themselves all the time. And I find it to be so strange because it's the one thing, kind of the fundamental thing as a therapist, that you're not supposed to talk about yourself. Now, with regards to relatability and relating to your client, you can often use examples of yourself so that you are being able to build a greater, tighter bond and a trustworthy relationship where they can relate, you can relate to them, they can relate to you, where it creates a safer space for them to be vulnerable. That's the only time that you should be using any of your own personal issues, examples. Some old school clinicians don't agree with this at all, but sort of the new, and I mean, I work specifically in trauma, right? So, and I also work with like, abuse recovery and different things. I can relate to my clients quite a bit. And when they're struggling with trust and they're so apprehensive and they're struggling to be vulnerable, part of building that relationship can be like, are you comfortable if I share something with you? Just so you can feel like I'm a safe, right? Only that. And it's very brief. And unless they ask further questions, this isn't about me. There's a purpose behind you disclosing.
Some theoretical orientations, there is no self-disclosure.
Nope, there isn't.
Psychoanalysis, Freudian, psychodynamics.
Yes. Freudian is not about self-disclosure at all.
But I will, and what I do with my clients too is if I say, do you mind if I share something? And I'll tell them, but then I also say, I will give you this time back. if we end up discussing and I feel like we're discussing me, like they ask me more questions or whatever, I tell them, so I've talked for 3 minutes. I will give you those 3 minutes back.
That's amazing. At least you get, yes, because then you don't feel like you're taking away from the client, or the client doesn't feel like they're
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, I actually went to a psychologist, and that's what happened. It was like bizarre, and I was already I'm a licensed therapist at the time, and I'm like, why did she spend over, it was a long session. She was doing a lot of neurofeedback and linguistics, and she spent like an hour and a half of that day talking about her own personal stuff and her own stories and her own. I'm like, okay, I know that we can relate to one another, but a lot of it was her venting about her own. It's just
Like, that's fascinating, but I'm here
but
for
I'm
you.
paying
I'm
you
here for
$1,400
It's like I
for,
going to therapy for my mental health.
yeah, exactly, right? And you just kind of shocks you a little bit, but um getting back to the show, and then the way that TV portrays, I know, Dr. Lerman, you're trying to get me to watch The Shrink Next Door. Is that what it's called? Yeah, because I want to see that one too. But
That is based on a true story. And
yeah,
stop right here just to say, if anybody has seen it, I really want to discuss it. It is based on a true story about a psychiatrist, thankfully not a psychologist, about a psychiatrist. And everybody knows I have issues with psychiatrists. But honestly, this is the only spoiler I will give. It's based on a true story, and the true story is actually worse than what they show on TV.
I've heard that. I've heard that because I've heard it's based on a true story and true
Yeah.
events.
Yeah. So, oh my God, please. The reason why I want you to watch it, and I want people to watch it, because that also shows you how insidious NPD is and how they worm their way in. So it's not like they don't hit you in the face with NPD. So for all the people that are like, why didn't I see it? How come I didn't know? On and on. This is a really good unraveling of that type of how things can happen that way.
Often people with NPD and sociopaths can fool therapists all day long.
Oh yeah, but
I had a
the psychiatrist is the NPD sociopath.
Oh yeah, but there is a lot of doctors and a lot of people that have that personality structure, right? And that's how insidious they can be. I'm not going to lie, folks. I mean, it does happen out there, and this isn't to discourage anybody from going and seeking treatment or therapy. But I had a therapist that hit on me. Literally, like, it was gross. It was my marriage. I was divorcing my husband and my ex-husband, and he literally made such an inappropriate comment that it just was, and he knew it was offside, but that was the end of that. It was like crossed every ethical boundary, and knowing that I was leaving a very toxic relationship.
They lose their license. See,
Oh,
we are mental health professionals overall. Our guidelines in California, especially with confidentiality and all of that, prior to HIPAA, HIPAA came and it was just a blip because we were over and above HIPAA, because we are dealing with the most vulnerable. They're giving us their secrets, their everything. Some of
well,
them
that's the whole point. Yeah.
Yeah. So the power, honestly, and any clinician that doesn't feel this way, I think is wrong. The power that we hold, you can't take that lightly.
Well, that's the problem, because they're in such an authority position and somebody that there's so much secrecy, or not, I shouldn't say, that's not the right word, confidentiality, and about that relationship, and that it's supposed to be such a safe place. This guy literally used his, oh, I'm on the board of the feminists at UBC and University of British Columbia, and I have my PhD in social work, and he was like all this stuff, playing himself out to be women's rights and activist for women, yet he's making sexual inappropriate references
He could
to
lose his license for
oh
that.
no, he has the worst reputation. He's been reported. He's known not being an ethical practicing practitioner at all. And so here's the deal, people. It's pretty evil. It's pretty abusing your authority and your power like that, especially as a person that's supposed to be the pinnacle of help and safety and security. But people are people. Lots of surgeons are narcissistic. They have that God complex, right? Doctors can be the fucking worst when it comes to the ego and the narcissism, and it's rampant, right? Yet they work in a field where there's supposed to be endless amounts of empathy and helping people, and they're not. Look at us. They have no bedside manner. They're academically gifted, and they can get the grades and they can do it and they can understand. But when it comes to actually treating another human being, they have no clue, and they're narcissistic up the wazoo. So people are just people. So
Yeah.
continue the red flags appropriately,
And same
regardless.
thing, yeah, if you go to therapy, I tell this to, I say this all the time. You are allowed to clinician shop. You're allowed to, the best predictor of outcome in therapy is the rapport between the client and clinician.
100%.
Credentials are extremely important. You want someone that's licensed in whatever level, master's or doctorate. You want someone that's licensed. You want someone with training. I'm sorry, but you don't want a life coach, not for therapy.
No.
You want a coach, not for therapy. And you don't want somebody that has gotten their certification in CBT from Udemy or whatever. Those are more for continuing education for clinicians already.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not for somebody who's like,
not
ooh,
for just a random Joe Blow that can take it. No, you got to be really careful again. And it's not to discredit life coaches. There's people that are actually legit life coaches that have the proper credentials to life coaching.
a
But
life coach.
a life coach
Do
is
mental
not the
health
therapy.
therapy.
It's different, right?
Yeah.
Again, their overall goal is like incorporating and work and different things. Where the therapist is somebody that goes into the past, the present, the future, all the things, right?
Deals with your vulnerabilities, your mental health. People don't understand. And this is why when knowing that shrinking and watching that, and again, it was a great show. I'm not bad mouthing the show, but what I'm saying is people look at that, and that also does give them this poor opinion of psychology and clinicians, because I don't want to pour my soul out to you. We get told things that people probably swore they would take to the grave, and they're telling
absolutely.
you know, and then to have someone, honestly, so many people have had their, especially in toxic relationships, have had their words and feelings weaponized, and they don't need a clinician to do that as well.
No, they don't. That's why this show was kind of like, no therapist logistically, ethically, morally would ever treat their patient like that. And if they do, they would probably lose their license pretty quick, and they would have the worst reputation, and no client would stick with them. And the fact that all his clients sort of stayed with him, regardless of how he sort of dismissed them, and because he was struggling with his own stuff.
Big time struggling with his own stuff.
Yeah, huge, and rightfully so, but then probably should have taken a sabbatical and a break until he dealt with his own stuff. But like, yeah, you don't, oh my God, we've been working on the same issue for 2 years. Like, he doesn't care. He abuses you. He's using you. He's a misogynistic, whatever, and then blasts her. And you're like, what?
And it's okay to say you need to make a decision. Let's talk about why you're stuck. But he tells her, I'm done being your clinician if you don't make that, if you don't leave him.
Yeah,
and
I'm firing you as a client. Yeah.
And I mean,
I know, it's crazy.
Okay. That is the technique that you can use is not firing them as a client, but by saying things like, obviously you're in this for something. Let's explore that. What are you gaining from it? Or what is it stopping? Or what is it? Whatever. But oh my God. And there was a point where she left him, her boyfriend, but then she went back. He ran into the boyfriend. See, that's another thing too, is our clients should not, we don't talk to our clients. I have told clients that I know live nearby. I said, look, if you see me, I'm not going to say anything.
Right,
I'm not going to be rude. If you say hi to me, I'll say hi back. I'm not going to be rude.
And having a conversation, because it's out of context. And again, for their confidentiality purposes, it's protecting them. It's not even so much protecting you, it's protecting them. Because if the people around, like maybe their mom or their brother or their husband doesn't know that they're in therapy. And then who are you? And then you're like, oh, hey, are you coming to my, like, no.
You got a session tomorrow, or sorry, I missed the last one, or anything.
And if I see you outside of the office or outside of our sessions, if you say hi, I might say hi back, but again, I'm not going to engage in conversation because it's not ethical.
No.
Right? And that's to protect you.
And if anybody in your family, anyone who does not have a release of information, they're not going to even know you're in therapy. Like I've had people say, well, what if my daughter, son, sibling, husband, whatever contacts you because they want some information? I said, I'm going to ignore the email because
Mhm.
I can't confirm or deny that
Mm-mm.
you're in session. And
No.
saying I cannot respond to your email is kind of confirming.
Yeah.
So I can't do that either. So if they try to, I can't respond
No,
to
it's
anything.
unethical.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I try to get releases for like pretty much everything if I can. Even when I don't necessarily need one, like someone wants their significant other, but they're not married to come to session, I will say, okay, can you sign a release of information just in case they want to come by themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Even though they're in session together and I can get a verbal confirmation it's okay for them to be there, but still, it's like I want, if I can, everybody to sign releases of information because I
You
don't.
know, I just had this in a supervision last week with my supervision group, right? So up in Canada, like we're required to have ongoing supervision every year and then continuing ed credits and everything to keep our license active. And I was in a supervision group and I brought up that very point about especially with couples counseling. And this is for everybody, just so you know, so you're aware, okay? Therapists are always put in very compromising positions when you're working with a family or you're working with more than one person. Because if you're working with the entire family and then you work with them individually, triangulation can happen very easily. It's the one thing that we as are trained is that a lot of people will sign a disclosure, or a therapist will say, I won't work with you individually if you're coming to marriage counseling or couples counseling, because then if one person, for example, this is just one example, infidelity has happened and they're telling you in confidentiality, which is your job as a therapist to keep that confidential, then then you're working with the group and this person says you can't say anything because I'm not going to tell them, that there's no honesty and transparency. And when you're working with couples, honesty and transparency is key to get the relationship moving in the direction. And now you know something that the other person doesn't know. They're at a disadvantage. This is what we call triangulation. And it's a
And
very,
they're lying too.
they're lying. Exactly. And so it's an unethical position they're putting you in. But lots of therapists will disagree. And so when I said, and I was just sort of empathizing with another clinician, because she kind of got caught in this situation where a husband disclosed that he's going to divorce his wife, but not to tell the wife. And it was just sort of a shitty thing to be like, and then he leaves and he left the conversation. And then that was sort of it. And I said, it's sort of like that rule of thumb when you're working in couples counseling or even family counseling is that if you're going to work with individual people, that there's no secrets.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you disclose something to me that is pertinent to your marriage and the success of your marriage and the healing of your marriage, you can everything kind of has to be on the table, or I will not work with people individually.
Right.
And I had a clinician fight back. She's like, I have a real problem with what you just said. And I was like, okay,
Oh.
tell. And then she said, well, I live in a small community and I'm the only therapist here. Like I work with everybody and there's sexual abuse going on. I can't disclose that. It's our job to hold on to all of that information. And it's our job to be like, hold that confidentiality. And it's not about us and how we feel and our level of discomfort. And then I politely intervened and said, I totally understand what you're saying, but I think you're missing the point of what I'm saying. It's not about holding information and that it's our job and that we aren't disclosing that it makes us uncomfortable. It's an ethical issue.
Yeah, because also that this therapy right now isn't genuine and real because
Mm-mm.
one person is withholding and they're withholding and then you can't say anything.
A crucial piece of information that pertains to the marriage and
Yes.
the
Yeah.
stability of the marriage and the function of the marriage.
Yep.
I mean, and it's not like they're disclosing, okay, well, I was sexually abused as a kid and my spouse doesn't know. That's a lot different with holding that information and obviously keeping it confidential. But when somebody discloses to you that I'm having an affair and I have no intention of telling my spouse and you're marriage counseling and you're working with both people, it is an unfair position you're
Yep.
putting and it's triangulation. And the therapist then you're always being put in these compromising type situations, right? But I don't know, perspective, I guess, but lots of people would disagree, especially if you're in a small community and you're working as kind of the sole therapist. And
But then you also have because I've worked with individuals
Mhm.
with marriage issues that were trying to do marriage counseling, but they couldn't find anyone. I said, I will do marriage counseling, but then it becomes marriage counseling, not individual counseling. It changes. And
Right.
I've had marriage counseling where it doesn't work out, one person leaves, and I end up doing individual with the other person.
Well, often what you'll find, I went through marriage counseling personally, and he wanted to see us individually. But then what happens is that they obviously, the therapist has to empathize with you. So the spouse uses that as a weaponizing tool, then goes back and says, but they told me this and they totally agree with me and you're wrong and then that creates conflict, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tricky
Because
territory.
I've had couples where couples counseling, okay, this is a little off the original topic, but I do have to say this. I enjoy couples counseling most of the time. But I have had couples where when I'm seeing people individually and marriage issues are part of their stuff, I will say, would you like to have your spouse come? So that, because I've had people like, my spouse doesn't think I'm working on this and this and this. And it's like, it's not up to your spouse, it's up to you. But do you want them to come and give their perspective? So I will have the spouse come because I have heard literally, I'm not kidding, 180-degree different stories.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Spouses, and then it's like,
right.
But I've also had where I'm in therapy and I tell them, this is not about taking sides. This is not about placing blame. This is about trying to repair something to move forward if that's what you guys want, or to decide whether you're not going to stay together. But it's not about blaming anybody because that's not going to do anything. Man, I've had people, I am not kidding you when I say this. I've had one party email me saying, why did you agree with the other party? It's like, what do you mean? Well, you agreed. You said, yeah, I get it. And it's like, okay, this is a whole other problem.
But that's what they do, right? Because they cling in the short and again, that's where it becomes really tricky if you're going to work with couples. And this is just so many different modalities of therapy. And honestly, you have to be an experienced therapist to do any sort of family or couples counseling, because you have to have a very strong demeanor of keeping everybody even keeled. You have to be the mediator. So again, you have to have a strong presence where you're not going to tolerate abuse going back towards spouses that are fighting and in the heat of the moment. And you have to be incredibly validating to both people and be able to then get them to see what you're doing. Right. So
I did have a couple though, where I won't say you need to leave, you need to stay, anything like that. That's not my, unless there's abuse going on. But I did have one couple where she came by herself one time and I was like, he is showing some strong NPD traits. I'm just letting you know. And she's like, yeah, I know. That's why I need to leave. I need to get the strength to get out. But she 100% agreed that was, I mean, when I saw them the first couple of times, like by the second time, I was like,
yeah, no, it's hard, especially when you can see. Often if I have clients that are in that situation, I will ask them the questions and say, how do you see what does that behavior mean to you? Like what does that signify to you and how does that make you feel? And then point out, and then they start really questioning and going, oh, right. Oh, yeah. And then I usually, if they say, what does that, well, this is what this means clinically. And that's what you're probably looking at rather than actually necessarily telling them flat out. It just depends on the dynamic with the client. But usually they can come up with the conclusion where you're just asking all the right questions so they can sort of start to figure it out.
This woman, she was like, because I said, over the years, she's like, this is consistent. This is always like this. This is what I figured.
Yeah.
It's nice to have confirmation, but I'm just like,
yeah, right.
Okay, this is personal. Also, I'm just kind of in my crawling, just going, what a fucking douche in my head. But I'm just like, yes, I get it. I understand. Bastard. I mean, I would never do that, but you have to, and that's another thing. Jason Segel says what he means, says what he means, and you can't do that.
No, you can't. No, you can't do that. We can think what we think all day long, but we can't say it.
Yeah.
Right. No, not at all. And then social media, that's another one, right? So we're looking at TV and we're looking at movies and different things. I mean, people, you got to take it with a grain of salt. It's not necessarily the way that therapy goes, especially if there's like that satire element to it, right? Just know that, and don't let it deter you away from seeking. help if you're putting on the fence, because that, again, I think that's where your aggravation comes in, Jody, is that you're trying to get people to seek out treatment because that's what people, and we need to get past that stigma with mental health and all the rest of it. But then we see shows like this and you're like, great, my therapist is going to judge me 9 ways to Sunday and they're going to boot me out of their office. Yeah, no, that's not what we do. We
You
have
would not believe.
regard.
You would not believe. And because I was surprised by this, how many times I have heard some form of, oh my God, you probably hate me now. I'm like, I'm sorry. Wait, what did you just say?
I used to say that to the therapist. I'm like, I don't know how you deal. I must be so frustrating for you.
I'm like, no, no.
Yeah, I know.
But it was like, it makes me sad as well, in the sense of we've all been judged at some point in our lives, the vast majority of us.
Yeah, of course.
And if you've ever been in a toxic relationship, you've been judged.
Yeah.
But to say it really shocked me. I've been hearing it a lot more. Not even since prison, I would tell them, look, you've already been judged. You've already been tried, convicted. I'm not here to judge you. I would say that. But to hear my clients sometimes say, oh my God, you probably think I'm stupid. Oh my God, you probably hate me. Oh my God, are you judging me right now? And I'd be like, oh my God, no. I mean, that was like,
yeah, that's the side of abuse, right? Like when you've been traumatized or you've had abuse and whatever, there's that sort of that structure within your dynamic or your personality where you're so worried that everybody's always looking at you like you're the problem.
Yeah. And I will tell people, because I've even had people say to me, I grew up in very, very toxic environment and then had this and this and this. So I must be the problem. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Right. Do any of you out there know Dr. Brene Brown? She's one of my favorites. Dr. Larman, do you know who that is?
I don't think so.
Really? Who Dr. Brene Brown is? Oh, she's a social researcher. So she's a psychologist or she's got her PhD, social work. And she basically did her whole dissertation on shame and the fundamentals. So she's written several books like Braving the Wilderness and Atlas of the Heart. And there's another one I just read or whatever, but she really focuses on and she did sociology as well. Is shame is the personality, the difference between guilt and shame. And she talks about this a lot. And that guilt is, I made a mistake. Shame is, I am the mistake. Okay. So this is, again, core belief systems that have been built in early childhood. So we can go to attachment theory with that. We can look at so many different various structures, but really shame is the pinnacle of dysfunction within a human being. And again, when you've got healthy attachment or secure attachment, you're more a person who can take, that you're human, you make a mistake with a grain of salt and you can move past it. Somebody who is constantly shame-based or that blamed or abused or whatever, and their environment has been toxic, will be like, there's something fundamentally wrong with me. I am the problem. So they make a mistake and the shame that they feel is unbearable. And they beat themselves, and the self-deprecation and all the rest of it. Hence as to why when they come to therapy, they're like, you must be absolutely so irritated with me, or I am the problem.
And the thing is, we've heard so many times, if there's issues and there's a common denominator, it's probably that common denominator.
Yeah.
So, well, all of these things happen because I'm involved in all of these. I'm the common denominator, so it must be me. And it's like, that's not what I understand the logic of that. That's not the logic, the reality. Because yes, if you go somewhere and you always have trouble at work, you always have trouble with your bosses, you always have trouble in relationships, you can't have friends, this, that, and the other. Yeah, maybe you are the common denominator. But if you've gone from a toxic childhood and maybe got SA'd and whatever, it's like I will tell people, you are the common denominator in the sense that it happened to you.
Absolutely. Or that you get in these perpetually abusive relationships. As a person who's been in multiple abusive relationships, hence as to why that led me to my therapy career, is that and by the way, just because you're a therapist, also, I will point out, we're not invincible. We are human. We still make the same mistakes. We still struggle with the same shit. right? Just so that you know, so that you can honestly have a sense of that we're not fucking perfect. We're far from it because we're human, right? We may understand it, right? And we may logically get it on a conscious level, but our subconscious is ingrained. That's where the real change needs to happen. And we all can still struggle with that.
This past week I was talking to my neighbors outside and I said to them, said it's a good thing I'm a psychologist this past week because I have been using every single fucking coping skill
Yep, that you've learned
in my toolbox just
oh my
to
God.
maintain my sanity.
Yeah, 120%. But as a person who's been in multiple abusive relationships, I've often had the narcissistic partner just be like, you say the same thing about this guy you're with, and then you say the same thing about this guy you're with. You seem to be the common denominator. You seem to be the problem. See how they reverse and they blame and they do the whole thing when you're like, yeah, they're right. I am the common denominator for finding toxic people. Not necessarily that I'm the problem, but when you're with an abuser, they will always turn that around and make you the problem, right?
And we will talk about Darvo
We
in
will.
another podcast.
Yeah, we will.
100%.
Because
Darvo
yeah.
is
Yeah, it is massive, especially when it comes to that level of toxicity with a certain demeanor or type of person, like a narcissistic person, right? Yeah.
But going back to when I said I tell people that you can clinician shop. When you go to your first therapy appointment, odds are it's an intake. It better be an intake. Although there may be someone else doing the intake before, depending on like what type of place you are. Because we had when I worked in community mental health, one person did all the intake stuff and then gave it to the therapist. However, most of the time, the first session is going to be a lot of question and answer. And like I tell my clients, I'm going to try to get as much from you, but if I have to go to next time because you are trauma dump. People have learned from social media, don't ever trauma dump on the first visit. You know what? This is your therapy session.
What? Who
Yeah.
says that?
Oh, yeah. There was this whole thing last year or the
that's
year before on TikTok.
Don't listen to that, people.
No.
That's not.
This is your therapy session. You want a trauma dump? I have had people that they're crying the whole entire time. This is therapy. That is fine. I will get the information that I need, the basic stuff that I need, and then I'll put the rest away for next week. We do have to get it done. We have to have a thorough biopsychosocial. Otherwise, we can't really, we're just working on what you're going at face value. We need to get deeper, your symptoms, all that. So the first visit, you might leave there going,
But you can also gain so much insight by just listening to a person and how they approach and what they say to you and how, if they come in and they trauma dump, it tells you right away that this person has significant trauma. Hello. So now you know sort of what you are dealing with.
Right. But we have to, for frickin' insurance and all that, we have to get
all
of those, like, do you use illicit substances? What level of education? Just the minutia.
The fundamentals, but I hate that part because honestly, as much as we need to do it, I'd rather do that after I've allowed somebody to gain their bearings with you as a therapist. Like, let them navigate. So the first time I meet people, I'm like, I had you fill out a little bit of an intake, but it was more like just like your personal information and your whatever, and if there's any sort of significant diagnosis that you already have, or if you're on medication, just the very basic. And then I just let them, okay, I'm going to let you run the show here. And I'm just going to sit here and listen to you. And if you want my feedback on anything, or you want my whatever, I'm happy to but this is where you get to show me or start building what you just get to talk and I'm gonna listen. Yeah.
So by the second time, I tell people, if you leave there with an icky, bad vibe, don't go back. Don't. If you're like, but if you leave there going, I don't know, go to the next one. See, because that was just an initial. Now, I cannot tell you how many people I've had say to me, I don't know how to tell my clinician that it's not helping. And I tell them, just say it. Say it. I know I personally, after like once a month or every 5 weeks or whatever, I will say to you, are we going in the direction that you want? Are we working on the things that you want? Now, I'm the navigator, you're the driver. But you can always, I'm not turning left here, and then we
Mhm.
recalculate. That is fine. But if we are not doing what it is that you came here for,
Mhm.
I would like to know, because otherwise we're just sending you adrift and going through the motions. So
Mhm.
tell your clinician, say something. Yes, they are an authority figure in your mind, but we're just people. And
Well,
the
that's just
vast,
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
and
vast majority want to know. There's going to be
Mhm.
some that don't. There's going to be some that are like, fine, then leave. But we
Mhm.
want to know, I believe, if we're not touching on what you're hoping.
Well, again, goals, right? And then
Yeah.
reverberate. Like a therapist will be able to honestly do a proper assessment, do like what Jody's saying about biopsychosocial and get like there's diagnostic assessment, there's lots of different, there's behavioral assessment, like there's lots of different therapy modalities that therapists will engage in to get a good idea. The idea is to identify kind of the schema and people's behavior and what they do, and then also symptomatic behavior of certain things that you can get an idea of what that person's struggles are. Everybody's individual and will have different things. But really, it's what do you want out of the therapy? What are your goals? What do you want to change? What is it that you want to work on? What are you struggling with? And then constantly being able to sort of um, conceptualize all of that and then reverberate or reiterate, sorry, reiterate that back to the client and just say, do it. Did I hear you properly? This is what we want to work on. And touching on that constantly so that you're not getting lost where the client's like, okay, what were my goals again? Like, I don't even remember. Right.
I've had people come to therapy and say, I want to work on A.
Hmm.
Like, okay, we'll work on A. But then they never work on it. And I
Hmm.
will say, look, if that's not what you want to work on, that's fine. But you
Hmm.
came here saying you wanted to work on that. So either
Hmm.
you're avoiding for a reason,
Hmm. And we
uh,
need to investigate. Yeah. Yeah.
or you've moved past that. And that's
Yeah.
fine too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't,
Exactly.
I said, be truthful to yourself, because you can lie to me all you want. All that's
Mhm.
doing is not benefiting you.
Yeah. And, or they can come in with that idea that that's the goal, but then the further they get deeper into therapy, it changes. And then they're like, no, takes precedence. This is more important. I'd rather work on this. Then we can get back to that.
Yep.
Maybe this leads to that. And that's why I'm struggling with this. And it's all connected. Right.
Nothing is written in stone. And I
No.
tell people, even when I give you a diagnosis, because your clinician, when you go to therapy, they should tell you. And if they don't, you are free to ask, please, their credentials, which you should already know when you get there, but you can ask them about their credentials. You can ask them their orientation. You can ask them kind of their background. Like, I will tell people, this is my main orientation is CBT, but I am eclectic. I work with whatever empirically based works with my client. And
Hmm.
even when I do CBT, it's not the same for everyone. I do give homework.
Hmm.
Sometimes it is homework just for that week. Sometimes
Hmm.
it's homework like, I would love you to think about your goals and write
Hmm.
them down so we have an idea. So also you're going in the right direction. But I've also had, I said, because I've had people that are like, oh my God, please don't hate me. I didn't do my homework. And I'm like, honestly, it's for your benefit. You're not going to be penalized. You're not going to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
chastised. It's like,
No.
and if I give you homework and you're like, I don't want to do that, I would rather do this,
Hmm?
do it. If you can generate this stuff, do it. I have clients that are like, I don't want homework. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to do anything except for this time. And I tell them, this time is not what's going to benefit you. But if
Hmm.
that's what you want to do, I will recommend things. You can take it or leave it.
Hmm.
But I'm going to kind of guarantee that you're not just going to shut it off
Hmm.
until the next time we meet, because that's not why you came to therapy. If
No.
you could
Well,
just
the
shut
proof
it off,
that the more that they just do in session and they're not practicing or they're not using the skills outside of in real life,
it
nothing's going
doesn't
to change.
work. It
And we're
doesn't
just,
work.
mhm.
Yeah. But
And then say that you've been here for X number of sessions or months or years. And my recommendation was this, but when you don't practice these skills outside, we just sit here and maybe that's all you want, but you're
and
not
that's
looking
fine.
for. Hmm.
If that's what you want. I mean, honestly, you're paying for it.
Yeah.
We've had
Yeah.
in case conferences, we've talked about how sometimes we don't feel like we're of any benefit because they're just talking. And it's like, but that's the benefit. If that's what they want and they keep coming back and you ask them and they're fine.
Hmm.
We are here for the client. The
Hmm.
client isn't here for us.
No.
And sometimes you're just not going to fit with a client, and that is okay. And sometimes You're not going to fit, the client's not going to fit with the psychologist. That's okay. But the client, I think the most important thing is the client needs to feel comfortable.
Of course, safety.
Yeah. And because that's what therapy is all about.
Well, our job is to create safety. That's our number one goal, is trust and safety, right? It's like any relationship. If you don't have those things, it's not going to work. It won't function.
And there's different ways. Everybody's got different demeanors. I have the type of clients, somehow it works out this way, that are great. Like I have that sweatshirt that says, shh, no one cares. And I've asked a couple of my clients and they're like, oh my God. Now, there are some clients that I wouldn't wear that because they probably wouldn't understand it. You know what I mean? It might be harmful. Not any of the ones that I have, but
Right.
you know, I have clients. You also get to know your clients. I'm not going to right off the bat treat you like I know you. You know, clients are the clinicians also feeling you out in the sense of what, huh?
Intuition. You're using your intuition to gauge who this person is and what you can and can't
get away with. Like I have some clients that need more nurturing and hand holding. I have some clients that might need sarcasm and dry humor. You know, everybody's going to be different. And that's why in being a clinician and listening, everybody is different.
100%.
Person and must be treated, I don't like to use absolutes like must, but as their own individual. Like there's no one size fit all. I see all of these things lately. I'm seeing all these advertisements on social media for this solution-oriented therapy or whatever. And every client, it works with every client and every problem.
Oh, fuck that.
Huh?
That irritates me. Hearing that irritates.
And I will leave a comment saying, please don't say that, because that is unethical, because there is no one size fits all therapy.
No, there isn't.
There's no one size fits all orientation.
Have any issues, then we wouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. If you could deal with every single client that you ever get, I've had clients where I'm like, I don't think I'm the best fit for you.
No, and it's like, again, that's false advertising. That's not at all realistic and okay to say. And that is like, you know, you're perpetuating false hope for people.
And I think it's unethical and I think it's illegal.
Yeah.
So there is no one size fits all.
I don't know you, but I haven't had any training for any sort of one side like solution therapy that's that's going to cure a person. I mean, it takes, like you said, it's the individual, it's the, you know, the symptoms of whatever it is that they have. It's if there's a disorder involved or any sort of significant mental health issue, what that criteria and what that looks like. And then the individual person is the most important part that you're taking in. And we're all on a spectrum. It's all going to look different. So you can't fit people into a box. It's ridiculous to think that we can.
Yep. You can't fit clinicians in a box and you can't fit clients in a box.
No.
And you can't fit depression in a box. You can't fit anxiety in a box. You can't fit schizophrenia in a box. It's all treated similarly. I mean, that's why we have techniques and stuff, but different. You modify the technique.
You modify the technique depending based on the person and based on their individual needs. And I mean, I often mix my techniques.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Use CBT and then I use DBT and then I use person-centered, or I use more of a Gestalt therapy. Like it just depends. Technique is, again, and you know, like finding that I think that this modality is more helpful than this one, or I feel like today I think this is going to be a better approach if I kind of, you know, we take them and they get them to see that they have different parts of themselves. So a person-centered, Carl Rogers, like there's just so many different modalities that if you learn, you're taking the individual and you're working and it's changing all the time. And then you find the best one that fits and the stuff where they go, oh my God, now it clicks. I get it. Yep. I was doing CBT for so long and it was great, but now this DBT thing seems to work better. Or I feel like CBT is more my route and I could never really wrap my head around, but it just depends on the person.
Like using Gestalt, because I use the unsent letter all the time, which is Gestalt. Gestalt all the time. I use radical acceptance.
Yes, I love that.
And I use CBT. I use CBD too, but CBT. Right. But what's really, really great though, is I have clients and this is like, I want to just like, woohoo, we celebrate it. I've had clients that have told me that the techniques that they've used, they're like, I know it worked because I had so-and-so and they were going through this. And I told them, you need to use this technique. Try this. They did it for homework, right? And they gave homework to their friends.
I love that.
it working for them. And I'm like,
See?
see, that's when you know
Yay!
it's working.
That's a win for us. We love that. We absolutely love that. And secondly, here's the thing. They should be teaching CBT and DBT skills in school at an elementary, preschool. Like these are life skills, guys. Like if you can learn these coping strategies and these coping skills, you'll be able to go up against every difficult what you would think is an intolerable situation in life,
Put it differently. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Especially rat.
So yeah, yeah. Well, that one I know you're like, I hate red. And it is. It's one of those things
Yeah.
where, but it's especially when you lack the control of a situation. And I know we talked about radical acceptance last time, but even in my own life, I've had to use this so many times so I don't go out of my skin
Mhm.
in anger and bitterness and resentment because of the injustices that I've gone through. I have to. I don't have any choice. And really staying in that bitter, angry place doesn't get you anywhere. So
Yeah.
again, these skills are, and they found that these therapies and these modalities have become so much more generalized, where originally they were created or they only used them in so many different settings. CBT was originally only used in depression or for depression. Or DBT was only used for highly suicidal and borderline patients. And now they're used more for everything: depression, anxiety, like you name it.
Well,
Right.
even the orientation of eclectic, because when
Mm-hmm.
we do our notes, we have to put what orientations we use. We don't have to
Mm-hmm.
put every, but we just put like one or two if we're doing something. But eclectic is there now
Mm-hmm.
because, like, and I've said this for a long time, I don't stick to one thing. Yes,
No.
it's like, for example, my colors, I will wear a lot of charcoal gray.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of my base in the winter. But do
Right.
I stick with only that? No, obviously not. So same thing with orientations. If you only stick to one,
Mm-hmm.
if you get a therapist, if you get a clinician who it's kind of the same thing over and over and over. I've had people that said they went to trauma therapy and now they were ready to move on. But
Mm-hmm.
the clinician was a trauma therapist, so didn't know how to move on
Right.
after the trauma was worked through. So everything was also brought back to the trauma. That no matter what happened, well, today I had a really bad day. Well, that's because of the trauma. It's like, no, the fuck,
No,
it's not.
no, it's
It's
not. No,
not. So
but if you're actually
if,
a good trauma therapist, you know that's not the case, right?
but speaking as a trauma therapist, then you know when it's kind of time to maybe now we're out of my scope. You got that. Would you
Yeah.
to someone else?
Yes, somebody else, if they're still having issues. I
That
mean,
are
honestly, I don't just work as a trauma therapist. I work in a lot of different things, but it's sort of my niche and it's my passion. Like I really gravitate to or want to work with people who struggle with things like, complex trauma and especially coming out of that certain type of insidious abuse, right? With narcissism, it seems to be the favorite term of the century or the more right because it's becoming more well known, but it's more or less when people are doing good and they come to a therapy session and they're like, I don't really know what to talk about today, right? I don't really have anything. I feel really content. I feel really good. That's where you can just give them the option and say, you know what, maybe it's time that you just, because our goal really is not to be working with people forever.
yes.
You got to cut the relationship, right? And it's hard on the therapist and
It's
it's hard on the client.
bittersweet.
It's
It's
bittersweet.
bittersweet because you're
Like
like,
I'm going to
yes,
miss
you're
you
doing so
because you built
well.
such a beautiful bond with these people, and
Yep.
these people, and you have such an intimate bond with them. I don't mean in a sexual way. I mean just like again, vulnerable and all of this thing that it is a hard thing. It is very bittersweet, but you've done your job. If people are like, I'm good and you help me a lot, that's amazing,
Yep.
right? And that here's the
Yeah.
thing. They will usually come back at some point because when things get hard again and life comes up, they're like, maybe it's time to check in with my therapist again.
And
Right?
I love that too, because I've recently it's funny because when my caseload, I start graduating people and it's like, so sad. I love
Right.
working with them. But then old ones, it's knock wood. I'm really lucky this way. Like if I'm going to graduate 2 or 3 clients, oddly enough, 2 or 3 of my old clients would be like, do you have any opening? Cause I just want to come for,
Is it?
to check in or whatever. And it's like, wow, okay. I've
Yeah.
had people like, and I say to them, it's funny because they're like, hey, Dr. Lerman, I haven't talked to you in a while. Where are you now? And can I go? And I tell them, it's like, I want to say nice hearing from you, but at the same time, this is therapy. So and people are usually in distress. So I don't really know how to say, hey, nice hearing from you. So I don't want to sound rude if I don't say that, you know?
Right.
But most of
Right.
the people say I'm not in any distress. I just need a refresh. And I tell people too.
That's amazing. And that comes down to, again, healthy levels of, like, again, mental health is not a faux pas. It's not a bad, it's not this stigma
No.
around it. Like such bullshit. We all need it.
Yep.
It should be mandatory that everybody has a therapist to check in with. And as a therapist, I have my own therapist. I have to. How the hell am I ever going to get better and continue to grow and gain any sort of introspection and further introspection and knowledge if I don't have people that I need to check in on my
But it's
stuff?
not even because you use the term getting better. And
Mm.
I don't like that because that means that you're not. And
Well,
I
okay,
like to
wrong
say is,
word.
I know what you're saying. I'm just
Growth.
good on semantics, but what it is we take a lot in emotionally. Because believe it
Mhm.
or not, we don't dwell on our clients like 24/7. But
Mm-mm.
I think about my clients. There'll be things where it's like, oh, this would be great for my client, or something will pop into my head. Oh my gosh, now I know what I can, tell. And I'll write stuff
Mhm.
down sometimes or make little notes and not with names or anything, but just like, oh, mention this or whatever. But I think about my clients. I hope my clients are doing well. I don't just turn off
No, we don't
their,
ever do, because again, they become ingrained. But there's also what we call as therapists, and Dr. Larman can attest to this as well, is empathy burnout. Because
yes.
we are very, by nature, extremely you have to be an empathetic person to be any sort of therapist. Like you just have to. You can't, you're supposed to anyways, unless you're faking it because you're a sociopath. But you literally have to have that is and frontline workers in hospitals and emergency and therapists, we all have what we call eventually empathy burnout. When I watch, and I've read a lot of Dr. Marsha Linehan's work, and she's the founder of DBT therapy, and she just said part of DBT is being a therapist is you have to have a team of people to take care of one another because of the high level of burnout, because you're dealing with the most difficult people and clients and patients. They're highly suicidal, highly self-harming, or severe, pathology with borderline or any sort of. It's challenging. It's really, and it becomes very taxing on you. So that's why you have to have a team of people to make sure and you check in with. That's part of the therapy modality, and staying true and honest to the therapy, the modality itself, and what that in conceptualizes, and also what it takes in order to keep working with people. She chose to work with the most difficult people because she was one of the most difficult people,
Yeah.
right? She shares her story. It's pretty amazing. And I mean, pretty hard as a PhD doctor, social psychologist, and researcher who founded one of the most amazing forms of therapy, to be told by her colleagues never to share her story of her highly suicidal, self-harming behavior because how it would make her look. And for her to come out in 2011 and say, I don't want to die a coward. But the reason why this was born and how it came to be was due to my own personal experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, just piggybacking off of that really quick, and then we're going to have to wrap it up is, um, we also, because we're human, there
Mm-hmm.
are things that will be told to me that I'm like in my head going, oh my God, that is exactly what I went through with my ex.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't trigger me anymore necessarily, but that's another reason for having a therapist or someone,
Yeah.
because we need to then turn around sometimes and go, oh my God, this happened today. I need to discuss it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So for clinicians to have clinicians.
Oh
So
no, so we have to, because that's exactly how we stay. That's a part of our self-care.
yeah.
Like we have to have a lot of self-care because of our job can be very emotionally intense, right?
Oh, and just
So,
like working in a prison, I wish we could have put a camera in our office because we
oh
had
God, I can't even
podcasts working in
imagine.
prison, but we had to have humor and all of that because of the stuff that we encountered.
No kidding. Right?
Yeah.
It's like that gallows humor and that black humor is
Yep.
really hospitals. And my dad was a firefighter for years, and he says, "Oh yeah, it's how we coped." Right?
And you can't
Yeah.
do it outside of your circle because they would not understand.
No, they
Uh,
wouldn't. No, not at all.
So just like to wrap up, when you see things in social media or on TV or in media with therapy, oftentimes it is not an accurate portrayal of therapy. Watch that Shrink Next Door or the Shrink Next Door, because that is an actual true story, and I would love to discuss that.
Yeah.
But when you go to therapy, if you go to therapy, and I truly, like you said, I believe we have to have a diagnosis to bill insurance.
Mhm,
So I wish they had preventative
mhm,
therapy so that somebody doesn't get a diagnosis. Like, I'm coming because I don't want to be depressed. I'm
mhm,
coming because I don't want adjustment disorder. I want to cope with this in a better
mhm.
way. I'm coming because I'm feeling like if I do this anymore, I will have anxiety. You
Of
know,
course.
but we have to have a diagnosis. So
Mhm.
people wait a lot of times until there is a diagnosis.
Yeah, that's sad. We have a lot of preventative therapy here. I mean, I work with lots of people with various different diagnoses, of course, but a lot of it is, just coming in knowing that they're struggling with various different things, and so that they can not wind up with a diagnosis in the
They come
end.
in with V codes probably,
Hmm.
which according to insurance, insurance doesn't cover V codes. Like, there's a parent-child relationship V code. There's all these different kind of V codes that I really think need help, but
Hmm.
insurance won't bill. So we have to put a
Hmm.
code. So that's why I'll tell a lot of people, it's a mood disorder. You are not clinically depressed. You have mood issues. Don't be, because people are scared of diagnoses too. It's like, don't be
Hmm.
scared. It's not,
Hmm.
so I wish that they had that. And
Hmm.
I do believe in therapy, even to learn coping skills,
Hmm.
period,
Absolutely.
in life.
Hmm.
And don't be afraid to talk to your clinician. Don't be afraid to interview your clinician. You're allowed to interview your.
Yeah, no, you do. It's such a personal and, again, private and, like, just very vulnerable situation that you're in, that you have to have somebody that you absolutely are going to feel okay with. And so I've often said the same thing. I'll tell all of my people, I'm like, if I'm not for you, that's okay. I would never take offense to it. You got to find somebody that is for you. Also giving and empowering them, right?
Yeah,
It's a
it's
really
your
powerful.
session. The
Mhm,
one thing to remember too is therapy is your session.
mhm,
You are the one driving.
mhm.
I am Siri or the navigator on your phone that recalculates because you drove
Right.
too far past.
I'm Alexa.
Yeah. If you yell Siri, my phone will probably go off. But you are the one in charge,
Yeah,
not
that's
the
right.
clinician.
That's
And
right.
going back to shrinking, if your clinician yells at you,
Yeah, don't go back.
no. But you know
No.
what? You can also say, I am not coming back, because that is completely inappropriate behavior.
Mhm.
You can say that.
Absolutely. You absolutely can say that. It's good. Hold people accountable, right? I agree.
Accountability in therapy is huge. So that's a good one.
Huge.
Hold your
It's a good
clinician accountable. We hold
yes.
you accountable.
Absolutely. So hold us accountable,
Us
right?
accountable.
This is a good thing, right? Growth. All
Great
about growth.
place to end. Hold
Yes.
your clinician accountable. So, as always, click the little bell up in the corner on YouTube. That will tell you every time we drop an episode, which is about every 2 weeks. Please leave comments. Tell us what topics you would like. We can go the whole range of topics. I have a
Mhm,
couple that I am like, I want to talk about my pet peeves, anybody's pet peeves, but I want to
mhm,
spew out my want to talk about communication, want to talk about that the shrink next door. Uh,
mhm.
leave comments. You can email us at wcwycw1@gmail.com. Tumblers that Bree can get.
Yeah. Yeah. Give me tips, people. I can order where I'm not, I mean me in Canada in a different country, but we can order. We order from the
You
USA.
have Amazon, right?
Oh god. Yeah. It's like it's my addiction. I'm not addicted to
Oh my
booze
God.
or drugs.
Really quick.
Amazon.
I didn't never had Amazon Prime for the longest time. So I would wait till I had like $35 or whatever in my cart before you could get free shipping. So I was very prudent and frugal. Now that I have Amazon Prime, it's like, oh, I need this ship. Oh, crap, I forgot that. I need that ship. So I
Oh
get
my
like
god.
18 different charges
It's
on
a
my.
problem. I'm like, what can make me happy? Oh, I'll shop on Amazon.
At
It's
night,
really
I'll be like,
bad.
oh crap, I forgot to buy dental floss at the store. Dental floss. Okay, shit. And then it's like, oh no, I forgot that Sean needed something. So yeah, and then I get my credit
I
card.
need therapy for my Amazon addiction. There you go. It's a perfect reason why I need to check in my account. Spending too much money.
I think
It's just too easy.
I think we all need, I think we all, I don't know anyone. Well, I do know a couple of people that don't shop on Amazon, but everybody else has an Amazon addiction.
Yeah, I know, right? So easy and convenient. I know. Anyways,
So
on that note, thank you so much for joining.
yes. And we will see you guys. Please, we'll see you guys soon. I was going to say, so
Yeah,
every 2 weeks
absolutely.
and comments, all of that good stuff.
Yeah.
And have a really good 2 weeks after this.
Mm-hmm.
After you hear this, it'll be 2 weeks. I don't know what I'm saying. I think the alcohol might be hitting.
I think it's yeah, we do it we post on Monday and then we do usually a podcast on the following Monday.
So we
Yeah.
do posting podcast.
Posting podcast. Yeah. So you'll see us again in the next 2 weeks.
Yes. There you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
And you guys
Excellent.
stay safe and
Yes.
take care.
Talk to you soon. Bye everyone.